So I'd like to talk to everybody about expanding your artistic horizons. Thank you. I'd like to talk to everybody about expanding your artistic horizons, and it's a really good way to breathe passion into your art and into yourself. I've done it myself over the years. You know, every now and again we feel a little stagnated, and you need to do something to kind of bring it back to life. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So the great thing is, you're already an expert. You've been at your craft for a long time. You know the ins and the outs. You know your stuff, and that's great. However, because you know your stuff, that can also limit you. Oh, can you go back a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Innovation, when you're talking about anything, whether it's a craft or your job or anything, there's a level of being uncomfortable. You have to get uncomfortable to innovate. And it can be exhilarating when you find something amazing. And you can innovate anywhere. And it can also be ecologically minded. I'm a big fan of upcycling and being green whenever possible. Next. So we really do have a world of materials available to us that we might not look at as materials. Who still has a pile of VHS tapes or cassette tapes laying around? I know I do. Broken china, stirrups for horse riding. That necklace right there is crocheted from cassette tape ribbon. Yeah. And it includes some Aurora Borealis black beads as well. It looks really swanky, but it's made from a cassette tape. And that's what I'm talking about. You can get really amazing with really weird stuff. And there's also yarns made from t-shirts. I found a seller on Etsy. I do a lot of shopping on Etsy. I also sell on Etsy. I love that place. Next one. And I'm sure we've all seen jewelry made from spoons and forks and everything, and it all looks pretty normal until I found that bracelet. It doesn't look much like a fork to me anymore. A lot of the bracelets that I see made out of forks still look like forks. So even though someone's already done it before, doesn't mean you can't do it better. Next, please. Here's another cool one I found. Old tins, whether they're old or new, you can turn them into other things. You can turn them into findings for jewelry. This one's a light plate switch. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
You can use them for embellishments on other things if you're a multimedia artist. You could use them in stained glass. Heck, you could foil those things and use them in your glass. It's amazing what you can do with stuff if you just kind of push yourself outside of your comfort zone and think outside of the box. Here's some really cool things. The one on the far left with the gear, that's one that I did. I wanted to use an old bike gear that a friend gave me and make stained glass out of it for him. The middle one, someone used a snowshoe and put stained glass in it. I'd never seen that before. And the one on the end over here is a stirrup that someone made a little stained glass piece to fit inside.
Wow.
Next. So the point of using unconventional materials is to add another dimension to your work. Your work is already great, but can you make it better? Can you make it more interesting? And like I said, you can also do it with that kind of green mindset. Can you upcycle something? Can you not throw something away and use it in your work instead? And I want you all to challenge yourself to use something weird in your work. I'm constantly challenging myself to do weird things with my stuff, and sometimes it sucks, and sometimes it's amazing. Next, please. And embellish. Add a little bit of something different to something that you're already doing. So the product that I have featured up here is embossing powder, and you can use it for photographs, you can use it for paintings, multimedia, anything paper-based. It just adds a nice shine and depth to your work. I have an artist friend that uses this stuff, and she swears by it. She can't get enough of it. Next. And here are some vintage photographs that people embellished. The one with the skirt is hand embroidered with rainbow colored thread, and the one with the dots is sewn, I believe, on a sewing machine.
Wow.
They sewed the circles onto the photograph to give another layer of texture and visual interest. So you can use it to highlight something interesting about your work, and you can also use it to add another layer of interest to your work. So the way I like to think of it is whenever I go shopping, it doesn't matter where. It could be the grocery store, craft store, bookstore. There's always weird stuff. Add stuff to your work. You've got keys, shells, beads, bits of wood, gears, anything you can think of. You can probably work it in somehow. And you can embellish your printed work by adding paint. I've seen photographers that print on canvas and add oil paint to add a beautiful texture and depth to the work that wasn't there before. It's a beautiful photograph, but you add that depth to it, it makes it even more amazing. I've also seen people use gilding in interesting ways to highlight their work and to bring focus on what they feel is the important part of their work. Next. So experimentation is really what it comes down to. When you've been crafting or working in a medium for a really long time, it's really easy to get in factory mode. You just sort of make stuff and you do it because you know that it works and this is the winning formula. But experiment, get uncomfortable, try the weird things. Constantly look for inspiration. Is there an interesting texture that you see in architecture that you can maybe use in your work or replicate in your work? Is there an antique store that you can go shopping in and find cool things to use from the antique store? I do that a lot. Mm-hmm. Is there something going on in pop culture that you can represent in your work? Like Grumpy Cat? Does everybody know who Grumpy Cat is?
No.
It's a very frowny, adorable cat, and famous, making millions on the internet. But there's a lot of pop culture things that maybe you can represent in your art that will draw in another base of customers because it's quirky and it's silly and people like that kind of thing sometimes. But you have to accept failure as part of the process. You're gonna fail, and that's okay. You've made it this far. I'm sure you've failed a million times along the way to now. You can fail some more and you'll find some cool stuff along the way, I'm sure. And my last thing here is use or modify failed projects in new projects. And in the next slide, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I made those 2 candle holders and I dropped the box that they were in. Glass doesn't like being dropped.
No.
And after going through the effort of making the candle holders and knowing how much the supplies cost, I'm like, I can't throw this away. So I broke them up even more, stacked some pieces on top of each other, fired it back in the kiln to make bigger pieces, and I made the funky little leaf with it. I foiled the edges, threw some nuggets in there, and made something else with the completely ruined candle holders that I had. Yeah, that guy never made it out of my studio. My cousin came to visit and she's like, give me that.
Yeah.
So that was a little stroke of, I don't know if it's genius. I don't know how I like the leaf, but my cousin did, and I guess that's all that matters. So another thing that I do, and that I would suggest that you do too, is inspect the work of other artists. And this isn't to copy their work. Copying is what you do when you're new at a craft, because you don't know what to do. Inspect somebody else's work to see what they're doing. Is it amazing to you? Are they doing something that you're not doing? And maybe you can push yourself to make your work amazing in the way that you see that their work is amazing. Or do you look at their work and think, oh my God, everyone and their cousin is making this? Do you find it boring? Use that as a reminder to do not do that thing. Because if you think someone else's work is boring, you don't want to look at your work and think it's boring too. Your work should be invigorating to you, because if it's invigorating to you, your customers are going to want it too. And basically, it's just to use other people's work to think more critically about your own. It's kind of hard to separate yourself from your own work But if you look at somebody else's work, you can look at it with a more critical eye. So if you can find a way to separate your own ego from your work, you can look at it more critically and think of different ways to do things, or think of better ways to do things that might change things up for you. And one thing that I've found a lot of success with is talk to artists outside of your medium. They don't have the mental blocks that you might, because they don't know the limitations of your medium. They don't know what's status quo for your medium. They don't know what you do with your medium. So they'll have ideas, and you can take those ideas and say, well, I can't make it the way they said it, but maybe I can do it this way. And it's really, that's part of where the bike gear thing came from. My painter friend is a biker, and she's like, here, make stained glass with this. I don't know what the crap I'm gonna do with this. I figured it out though. Next. And another thing to think of is the common versus unique scale. Here's 3 journals. The one on the left is a fairly simple, you can pick it up anywhere, maybe a dollar store journal, and they put a print of the moon on it. I love the moon, it's beautiful, and it's a nice little journal. I wouldn't pay a lot for it. The one in the middle is a leather journal, and what I find fascinating about this one is they incorporated a place to hold the pencil, and it's leather cut and worked to look like a quill. And they've also got a little latch on it to keep it shut. And the one on the far right falls under the weird side for me. It's all wood on the outside, and it's got paper in the middle, and they made a, I can't think of what it's called. A hinge, thank you. A hinge out of wood for this journal. It's not very practical, but from an artistic standpoint, it's very innovative, very interesting. So, getting towards the end here, our dear friend Woody Allen, crazy, brilliant, not quite sure, a little bit of both. He said if you're not failing every now and again, it's a sure sign that you're not trying to do anything very innovative. And it's true. Because if you're trying to innovate, it's not going to be perfect right off. You got to work towards that perfection. And it's going to be frustrating. I know it has been for me. You're going to find limits of your materials, or refined limits of your materials. You're going to hit mental roadblocks and creative roadblocks, and you'll eventually make something terrible. It's just going to happen. But when you keep working and you push through all of that, next, you're going to find something that breathes new life into your craft. And you'll find a new way to express yourself through your art too. The lower left piece is what I thought to be a very interesting weaving job. I'd never seen anything quite like that before, but I'm not a fiber artist, so that might be normal, I don't know. And then the piece on the bottom right is a lost wax glass casting.
Wow.
Say that again?
It's a lost wax casting of glass to look like knitted,
Wow.
yeah, yarn.
And you did that?
No, goodness no, goodness no.
And why not?
Because I'm not that amazing
Oh, yes,
yet.
you will be.
Yet.
Yeah. That is gorgeous.
So hopefully that gives you guys some ideas to maybe start tinkering around with what you're already doing. Does anybody have any questions?
How did you get started in your craft?
It all started, one of my friends in college took a stained glass class, and then one of our other friends took a workshop over at Virginia Stained Glass, and they needed space to work. Well, I had a spare bedroom.
Okay.
They showed me the glass. It was all over from then.
Uh-huh.
Can't peel the glass out of my cold dead hands. Any other questions? Divya? I think Marianne took pictures, but I don't have them here. Do you happen to have them? No, but the studio, I was shopping for a house in 2008, and I got a 3-bedroom house so I could tear down the wall between 2 bedrooms to make my studio. So it's roughly a 10 by 20 space, and I have the smallest bedroom as the master, so you know where my priorities are.
Yes. Studio, number 1.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Put this in.